The wind howled through the gaps in the barn's weathered planks, carrying with it the scent of dried hay and horse sweat. Elias Boone pulled his coat tighter against the October chill as he made his way across the yard, his boots crunching on the frost-kissed ground. The sun had dipped below the horizon an hour ago, painting the Nebraska sky in shades of purple and black. At 43, Elias had grown accustomed to the rhythms of solitary life. 5 years had passed since consumption took Martha, and the farm had become his monastery, a place of work, prayer, and careful routine. Each evening before retiring, he checked the animals, secured the barn doors, and ensured all was well for the night. It was a ritual that brought order to his days, a small comfort in the vastness of the prairie. The barn door groaned on its hinges as he pushed it open. Inside, the familiar warmth of animal bodies and stored grain enveloped him. His 2 horses, Buck and Belle, nickered softly in greeting. Elias moved down the center aisle, checking water buckets and hay nets, his movements practiced and efficient. A sound stopped him cold, a soft whimper, barely audible above the settling of the barn. He froze, listening. There it was again, coming from the empty stall at the far end where he stored extra feed sacks. "Who's there?" His voice echoed in the rafters. No answer came, only the nervous shuffling of the horses. Elias reached for the lantern hanging on a post, struck a match, and lifted the light high. Shadows danced across the walls as he approached the last stall. What he saw there made his breath catch in his throat. A young woman lay curled in the corner, partially hidden behind grain sacks. Her dress, what remained of it, was torn and filthy, the fabric hanging in tatters. Her wrists were bound with rough rope, the skin beneath raw and bleeding. She couldn't have been more than 19, with tangled auburn hair that might have been beautiful once. Now it hung in matted clumps around a face marked by exhaustion and terror. "Lord have mercy," Elias whispered, setting the lantern on a barrel. He moved slowly, the way he would approach a spooked horse. "Miss, can you hear me?" The girl's eyes flew open, green eyes wild with panic. She pressed herself deeper into the corner, a trapped animal seeking escape where none existed. Her lips moved, but no sound emerged. "Easy now," Elias said, holding his hands where she could see them. "I mean you no harm. My name's Elias Boone. This is my farm. You're safe here." She watched him with those haunted eyes, her body trembling violently, whether from cold or fear. He couldn't tell. Probably both. "I'm going to cut those ropes," he said, reaching for the folding knife in his pocket. "Just hold still." "No!" The word exploded from her in a ragged cry. "Please don't peel my dress off too. Please, I'll be good. I won't run. Just don't." Elias froze, the knife halfway open in his hand. The terror in her voice cut deeper than any blade. What manner of cruelty had she endured to make her beg so desperately? "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly, crouching down to make himself smaller, less threatening. "Just the ropes, I promise. Just the ropes." She watched him approach with the wariness of a beaten dog. When the blade touched the rope at her wrists, she flinched but didn't pull away. The hemp parted easily under the sharp edge, and Elias carefully unwound the bonds from her chafed skin. It was then, as she moved her arms, that her torn dress shifted, revealing her shoulder and upper back. Elias's knife clattered to the hay-strewn floor. Brands, the kind used on cattle. Multiple marks seared into her flesh, some old and scarred over, others fresher, still angry and red. Letters and symbols he couldn't make sense of, burned deep enough that they would never fade. Someone had marked this young woman like livestock, claimed her with hot iron and cruelty beyond comprehension. His stomach turned, bile rising in his throat. In all his years, through the war, through the frontier's hardships, he had never seen such deliberate evil visited upon another human being. The girl saw his reaction and quickly pulled the torn fabric up, trying to cover the marks. Shame colored her cheeks, even through the dirt and exhaustion. "Who did this to you?" The words came out rougher than he intended, anger making his voice tight. She shook her head violently, fresh tears cutting tracks through the grime on her face. "Can't say, won't say. They'll find me. They always find what belongs to them." "You don't belong to anyone," Elias said firmly. "No person owns another. That's not how God intended." A bitter laugh escaped her, surprising them both. "God turned his back long ago, mister. Ain't no God in what they done to me." Elias retrieved his knife and folded it away. He shrugged out of his heavy coat and held it out to her. "Put this on. You're coming to the house." She stared at the offered coat like it might bite her. "Why?" "Because it's cold. You're hurt, and no Christian man would leave you in a barn like an animal." "Maybe that's all I am now," she whispered. "Branded stock, damaged goods." "You're a child of God," Elias said simply. "Nothing anyone does to you can change that. Now, can you stand?" She tried, using the wall for support, but her legs buckled. How long had she been tied up? How far had she traveled? Elias moved without thinking, scooping her up in his arms. She weighed next to nothing, bird bones and desperation. "No," she struggled weakly. "Put me down. You don't understand. When they come, and they will come, they'll hurt you too. They hurt everyone who—" "Let them come," Elias said, carrying her toward the barn door. "I've faced worse than cowards who brand women." The walk to the house seemed endless. She'd gone rigid in his arms, every muscle tense as though expecting violence at any moment. The yellow light spilling from his kitchen window looked like a beacon in the darkness. Inside, he set her gently in the chair nearest the stove. The warmth made her shiver harder, her body remembering what comfort felt like. Elias busied himself stoking the fire, putting the kettle on, finding what food he had ready: yesterday's bread, some cheese, dried apples. "What's your name?" he asked, setting the simple meal before her. She stared at the food like she'd forgotten what it was for. "Clara," she whispered finally. "Clara May. Something. Don't rightly remember what came after anymore." "Well, Clara May," Elias said, sitting across from her at the small table. "You eat what you can. Then we'll see about cleaning those wounds and finding you some proper clothes. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." "There ain't no rest to figure," she said, but she reached for the bread with shaking hands. "They'll come. Men like him always come for what they've marked." "Who is him?" Fear flashed across her features. She shook her head, pressing her lips together. Elias didn't push. He watched her eat, small, careful bites, as though she expected the food to be snatched away. The brands on her back seemed to burn through his mind. Someone had done this. Someone who believed they had the right to own another person, to mark them like cattle. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. Somewhere in the darkness, evil men might be searching for this broken girl. Let them come, Elias thought. He'd been a peaceful man since the war ended, had sworn off violence when he'd seen too much of what it wrought. But looking at Clara May, at the marks burned into her flesh, at the terror that lived in her eyes, he felt something stir that he'd thought long buried. Sometimes, peace was a luxury the wicked didn't allow. Sometimes, a man had to decide what was worth fighting for. And this girl, branded and broken but still breathing, still fighting to survive, she was worth it. He didn't know her story yet, didn't know what darkness she'd escaped or what pursued her still, but none of that mattered. She was here now, under his roof, eating his bread, and as God is his witness, no one would lay hands on her again, not while Elias Boone still drew breath. The fire crackled in the stove. Clara May ate in silence, stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking, measuring, evaluating, waiting for the mask to drop and reveal the monster beneath. But Elias simply sat, patient as stone, while the prairie wind howled its lonesome song around the little house. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. Tonight, there was warmth, food, and safety. For now, that was enough. The bread disappeared slowly, each bite a careful negotiation between hunger and fear. Elias watched without watching, busying himself with the kettle as Clara May worked through the simple meal. Her hands trembled less now, though she still flinched at every pop from the wood stove, every creak of the house settling. "More?" he asked when she'd finished the last crumb. She shook her head quickly, drawing his coat tighter around her shoulders. "No, sir, thank you." The formality in her voice pained him. What had been done to make her so careful, so measured in every word? He poured hot water from the kettle into a basin, added cool water from the pitcher until it was warm but not scalding. "For your wrists," he said, setting the basin on the table along with clean cloths. "And there's salve in that tin there. Martha's recipe, my late wife. Works wonders on cuts and scrapes." Clara stared at the basin as if it might contain poison. "Your wife?" 5 years gone. Consumption took her. He moved to the far side of the kitchen, giving her space. "You can tend to yourself. I'll be right here if you need anything." She dipped one wrist into the water tentatively, then hissed through her teeth as the warmth hit the raw flesh. But she didn't pull away. Slowly, methodically, she began cleaning the wounds, her movements speaking of long practice with pain. "Clara May," Elias said after a moment. "That's a pretty name. Your mother choose it." A bitter sound escaped her. "Don't remember no mother. First memory I got is the orphanage in St. Louis, then the factory, then—" She trailed off, focusing intently on wrapping her wrist with the clean cloth. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share." "Ain't about ready. It's about safe. The less you know, the less trouble comes to your door." She switched to her other wrist, movements sharp with suppressed emotion. "You seem like a decent man. Mr. Boone. Decent men don't last long when they cross paths with—" She cut herself off again. Elias pulled out his pipe but didn't light it, just held it for the comfort of familiar things. "I've lasted this long. Reckon I can handle whatever trouble follows you. You don't know him, what he's capable of." "Maybe not, but I know what I'm capable of, when pushed." He met her eyes steadily. "I wasn't always a farmer. Clara May, the war taught me things I've spent years trying to forget. But sometimes forgetting is a luxury we can't afford." She studied him then, really looked at him for the first time, saw the scars on his hands that didn't come from farm work, the way he held himself, alert even in apparent rest, the rifle mounted above the door that gleamed with careful maintenance. "Union or Confederate?" she asked quietly. "Union, 14th Nebraska Infantry." He rolled the pipe between his fingers. "Saw action at Fort Donelson, Shiloh, Vicksburg. Came home when it was done and tried to build something clean out of all that mud and blood." "And you think those old skills will help against men who burn women like cattle? Who treat people like property to be bought and broke and—" Her voice cracked. "I think," Elias said carefully, "that every man has to decide what lines he won't let be crossed. You're under my roof now. That means something." Clara May finished with her wrists and looked down at herself, at the ruined dress barely held together. I can't." Understanding dawned. "Wait here." He disappeared into the back room, returning with an armload of folded cloth. "These were Martha's. Been sitting in that chest for 5 years. Doing nobody any good. She was about your size, maybe a touch fuller. They should serve." He set the clothes on the table, a simple blue dress, undergarments, stockings, all clean, smelling faintly of lavender from the sachets Martha had loved. "I'll step outside," he said. "Take your time. There's more water if you need it, and soap there by the basin. When you're ready, just call." He grabbed his rifle from above the door, casual-like, as if it were mere habit, and stepped out onto the porch. The night was sharp with autumn cold, stars scattered like spilled salt across the sky. He could hear her moving inside, the splash of water, soft sounds of pain as she discovered new hurts. 20 minutes passed before her voice came, uncertain. Mr. Boone? He found her transformed. Martha's dress hung a bit loose, but it was clean and whole. She'd washed her face and hands, pulled her hair back into a simple braid. Without the dirt and desperation, she looked even younger. Just a girl, really. A girl who'd seen too much. Better? He asked. She nodded, fingers plucking at the unfamiliar fabric. I don't know how to thank you. These clothes, they're too fine for the likes of... They're clothes, he interrupted gently. Meant to be worn. Martha would have wanted them put to use. She must have been a good woman to marry a man like you. She was better than I deserved. He gestured to the rocking chair by the stove. Sit, rest. You look ready to fall over. She sank into the chair gratefully, exhaustion winning over wariness. The coat, his coat, she kept wrapped around her shoulders like armor. Where will I sleep? The question came out small, frightened. My bed. I'll take the barn. No, she half rose from the chair. I couldn't. The barn is fine for me. I've slept in worse places, much worse. You'll sleep in a proper bed, Elias said firmly. No arguments. I've bunked in that barn plenty of times during calving season. One more night won't hurt me. She settled back, but her fingers worried at the coat's hem. Why are you doing this? You don't know me, don't know what I've done, where I've been. I know enough. He pulled out a chair and sat, putting them on the same level. I know someone hurt you, tried to break you down to nothing. But here you are, still fighting. That tells me all I need to know about your character. Tears welled in her eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. You're either the kindest man I ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both. He smiled slightly. My Martha used to say they were often the same thing. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, there and gone like a bird's shadow. When he comes... If he comes, Elias corrected. If he comes, we'll deal with it then. Tonight, you're safe. Tonight, you rest. She looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Not quite trust, that would take much longer to build, but a tentative lowering of defenses. A crack in the wall she'd built around herself. Clara May Wilson, she said suddenly. That's my full name. Figure if you're risking your neck for me, you should at least know that much. Pleased to know you, Miss Wilson. Just Clara. Miss Wilson was someone else? Someone before? She pulled the coat tighter. I'm not her anymore. Elias stood, knees creaking. Well, Clara, whoever you are now, you're welcome here, long as you need. He showed her to the bedroom, pointed out where things were kept. The room still held touches of Martha, her brush on the dresser, a quilt she'd made, dried flowers in a vase. Clara stood in the doorway like she was afraid to enter. It's all right, he said. Martha wouldn't mind. She had a generous heart. I'll try not to disturb anything. Disturb whatever you need to. It's just a room. You're what matters now. He gathered a blanket and pillow for himself, paused at the bedroom door. I'll be in the barn if you need anything. There's a bell on the porch. Ring it and I'll come running. And Clara, she looked at him, vulnerable and young in Martha's dress. Whatever they did to you, whatever those brands mean, that's not who you are. You remember that. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. She nodded, unable to speak. Elias left her there, closing the door softly behind him. Outside, the night seemed darker, full of potential threat. He checked the loads in his rifle, studied the horizon for any sign of riders. Nothing but wind and stars and the distant howl of a coyote. In the barn, he made himself a rough bed in the hay, positioned where he could see the house and the road approach. Buck nickered softly, and he patted the horse's neck. Strange times, old boy, he murmured. Strange times indeed. He thought of the girl in his house, of the brands burned into her flesh, of the terror in her eyes when she'd begged him not to hurt her. What manner of evil existed in this world? To treat a person so? And what kind of man would he be if he turned away from someone in such need? The rifle lay across his lap as he settled in to watch. Somewhere out there, evil men might be searching. Let them come, he thought again. Some things were worth the risk. Some stands had to be taken. In the house, a lamp burned in the bedroom window, a small light against the vast darkness of the prairie. Clara May Wilson, whoever she had been before, was safe tonight. That was enough to start with. Tomorrow, they would face whatever came. But tonight, she would sleep in a real bed, wear clean clothes, and remember what it felt like to be treated as human. Sometimes, Elias thought, the smallest kindnesses were the most revolutionary acts. The wagon wheels creaked in protest as they rolled down the rutted main street of Cedar Falls. It had been 3 days since Clara May arrived at the farm. 3 days of careful quiet as she learned to move through the house without flinching at every sound. Now, Elias had insisted she accompany him to town for supplies, partly for practicality, partly because hiding would only fuel more speculation. Clara sat rigid beside him on the wagon seat, Martha's second-best bonnet shading her face, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles showed white through the skin. "Remember," Elias said quietly, "you're my cousin's daughter from Kansas City. Came to help with the harvest and winter preparations." "They won't believe it," she whispered. "One look at me and they'll know. They'll know what we tell them. Hold your head up. You've got nothing to be ashamed of." The General Store sat at the corner of Main and 2nd, its painted sign proclaiming Hutchinson's Dry Goods and Sundries in fading red letters. As Elias helped Clara down from the wagon, she could already feel eyes upon them, faces appearing in windows, conversations pausing mid-sentence. The bell above the door jangled their arrival. Inside, the familiar scents of coffee, leather, and lamp oil mixed with the underlying mustiness of bolted cloth. "Mrs." Hutchinson stood behind the counter, her sharp features arranged in what passed for a welcoming smile. "Mr. Boone," she said, her gaze sliding immediately to Clara. "And who might this be?" "My cousin's girl, Clara, from Kansas City." Elias's tone was easy, matter of fact. "She's come to help out for a spell." "Kansas City, Mrs." Hutchinson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Funny, I don't recall you mentioning any cousins there." "Man doesn't mention every branch of the family tree. Adelaide." He pulled out his list. "Need flour, salt, coffee if you've got it. Some thread and needles too." As he spoke, Clara drifted toward the fabric bolts, running her fingers lightly over the materials. 2 women near the ribbon display leaned their heads together, whispering. Their words carried despite their attempt at discretion. "Look at how she moves, nervous as a cat. And those wrists, did you see? All bandaged up under the sleeves." "Mr. Boone taking in strays now. First sign a man's going soft in the head, if you ask me." Clara's hand trembled on the calico. She started to retreat toward Elias, but found her path blocked by Mrs. Hutchinson, who had come around the counter with predatory curiosity. "Kansas City's a long way to come for harvest work," the shopkeeper said. "Your family couldn't find help closer to home?" Clara's voice caught. She cleared her throat, tried again. "Papa thought the country air would do me good. After my illness." "Illness?" Mrs. Hutchinson's eyebrows rose. "What kind of illness leaves marks like—" She reached for Clara's wrist. Elias materialized between them, smooth as water. "The kind that's none of your concern. Adelaide, we'll take 2 pounds of flour, not the usual 3. The shopkeeper retreated, but her expression had turned sour. As she measured out their goods, the whispers grew louder. Clara could feel the weight of every stare, every judgment. These people who knew nothing of her story had already written it in their minds, and their version was ugly. The bell jangled again. Reverend Caldwell entered. tall and austere in his black coat. His gaze found Clara immediately, and something flickered in his eyes, not the curiosity of the others, but a deeper recognition. "Mr. Boone," he said slowly, "I heard you had taken in a boarder. News travels fast." "Indeed it does, especially when the boarder arrives under unusual circumstances." The Reverend's tone was carefully neutral. "Perhaps the young lady would benefit from attending services this Sunday. The Lord's house welcomes all souls seeking redemption." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Clara's cheeks burned. "She'll attend if she chooses," Elias said evenly. "The Lord's welcome shouldn't come with conditions." "Of course not. I merely thought, given what people are saying—" "What are people saying?" Elias's voice had gone dangerously quiet. The Reverend had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Only that, well, a young woman arriving in the night, clearly in distress, it raises questions. Then let them ask me directly instead of gossiping like old hens." A crowd had gathered outside the store now, pretending to go about their business while stealing glances through the windows. Clara felt like a specimen under glass, examined and found wanting. Her breath came shorter. The walls seemed to press in. "I need air," she whispered to Elias. He nodded, abandoning the half-filled order. "We'll finish this another time. Adelaide." They pushed through the door into the crisp morning. The crowd parted before them, but the whispers followed like a swarm of hornets. "Saw her in the back of his wagon that first morning, looking half dead. Decent women don't turn up in such states. Wonder what she's running from. Or who?" Then, cutting through the murmur like a blade, a child's voice piped up. "Ma, why does that lady walk funny? Is she broken?" Clara froze. The innocent question hit harder than all the malicious whispers combined. Because she was broken, wasn't she? Marked and damaged and trying to pretend otherwise. "She's not broken," Elias said loudly, addressing the child but speaking to the entire street. "She's healing. There's a difference." He helped Clara onto the wagon seat, his movements deliberate and unhurried. As he took up the reins, a figure stepped from the gathered crowd. Thomas McKenna, the town's self-appointed moral guardian, his face flushed with righteous authority. "Now see here, Boone," he began. "This town has standards. We can't have just anyone." "Anyone what?" Elias's knuckles were white on the reins. "Anyone who's suffered misfortune, anyone who needs help. Thought this was a Christian community. Thomas, don't you dare question my faith. But when a woman shows up bearing the kind of marks that suggest—" He lowered his voice dramatically. "A soiled dove's profession." The crack of Elias's fist connecting with McKenna's jaw echoed off the storefronts. The man stumbled back, hand to his face, blood seeping between his fingers. "The only soiled thing here is your mind," Elias said quietly. "And if I hear you or anyone else speaking such filth about Miss Wilson again, you'll get worse than a bloodied nose." Shocked silence gripped the street. Then McKenna spat blood onto the dirt. "You'll regret that. Boone, this town won't stand for—" "This town can mind its own business." Elias clicked to the horses. "Good day to you all." As they rolled away, Clara sat frozen beside him, tears streaming down her face. "You shouldn't have done that. Now they'll all turn against you too." "Let them try." His jaw was set, anger still radiating from him like heat from a forge. "I've lived here 15 years, buried my wife in their cemetery, helped raise their barns and birth their cattle. If they want to throw all that away over their small-minded gossip, that's their choice. But I'm not worth—" He pulled the wagon to a stop, turned to face her fully. "Don't you ever say that. Not ever. You're worth 10 of Thomas McKenna and his ilk. They see those marks on you and think they know your story. But they don't know anything. They don't know your strength, your courage. They don't know what you've survived. They think I'm a—" She couldn't say the word. "I don't care what they think. I care what I know. And I know you're a good woman who's been through hell and lived to tell it. That's all that matters." They rode in silence back to the farm, but Clara noticed things she'd missed on the way in. Curtains twitching closed as they passed. Children called inside by nervous mothers. Men pausing in their work to stare. The story would spread now, twisted and embellished with each telling. By nightfall, the whole county would know that Elias Boone had taken in a marked woman and bloodied Thomas McKenna's nose defending her honor. "They'll come for me now," she said as the farm came into view. "Not just him, Jeb, but the town too. They'll make you choose." "Then I've already chosen." He helped her down from the wagon, steadying her when her legs shook. "Let them come with their gossip and their judgment. Let McKenna nurse his bloody nose and wounded pride. This is my land, my home, and you're under my protection. That's the end of it." But Clara knew it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The town had shown its true face today, suspicious, cruel, quick to condemn what it didn't understand. And when Jeb Crow and his men finally came, would any of these good Christian folk lift a finger to help, or would they stand aside, secretly grateful to be rid of the soiled dove and the fool who defended her? She looked back toward town, where smoke rose from chimneys and normal life continued for everyone else. For the first time since arriving at Elias's farm, she wondered if running would have been kinder, not to her, but to him. The wind carried the faint sound of the church bell, calling the faithful to their evening prayers. But Clara knew there would be no prayers for her in Cedar Falls. She was marked, and in their eyes, that made her less than human. Only one man in this whole town looked at her and saw a person worth defending. She glanced at Elias as he unhitched the horses, his movements sharp with lingering anger. One man, it would have to be enough. The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after noon, 3 days after the incident in town. Clara saw it first from where she was hanging laundry, the wet sheets snapping in the autumn wind like surrender flags. Her hands froze on the clothespins, and the basket tumbled from her grip, spilling clean linens into the dirt. "Mr. Boone!" Her voice cracked with terror. Elias emerged from the barn, took one look at her face, then followed her gaze to the approaching riders. 3 men, moving with the lazy confidence of predators who knew their prey was cornered. He wiped his hands slowly on his work cloth, his expression unreadable. "Get inside," he said quietly. "It's him!" Clara's whole body trembled. "The one in front, that's Jeb Crow!" Even at a distance, Jeb Crow cut an imposing figure, tall in the saddle, wearing a black duster that billowed behind him like wings. He rode with the assurance of a man who'd never been denied anything he wanted. His companions flanked him, one thick-set with a scraggly beard, the other lean as a whip with dead eyes. "Inside," Elias repeated. "Now." But Clara seemed rooted to the spot, paralyzed by the approach of her nightmare-made flesh. Elias took her arm gently, guided her to the house. At the door, she turned back. "He'll kill you," she whispered. "He's killed men for less than what you're doing." "Let me worry about that." He pressed his rifle into her hands. "You know how to use this?" She nodded, clutching the weapon like a lifeline. "Good. Bar the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." The riders were in the yard now, their horses' hooves raising little clouds of dust. Elias walked out to meet them, empty-handed but not defenseless. He'd faced worse odds in the war. At least then, he'd known who his enemies were. These men wore the trappings of civilization, clean clothes, expensive boots, legal papers no doubt tucked in their saddlebags. But they were wolves just the same. Jeb Crow dismounted with fluid grace, his spurs singing against the hard-packed earth. Up close, he was handsome in a sharp-edged way, with pale eyes that missed nothing and a smile that never reached them. He looked to be about 35, with premature silver threading through his dark hair. "Mr. Boone, I presume?" His voice was cultured, educated. It made him more dangerous, not less. "Jeb Crow. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I don't trade in human beings, Mr. Crow. The smile widened, showing too many teeth. How noble. But I'm afraid you're mistaken about the nature of property rights. I have papers, legally binding documents, that prove ownership of the girl you're harboring. No piece of paper makes owning another person legal. Not anymore. Ah, but you see, she's not legally a person. Crow pulled out a leather folder, extracted several official-looking documents, declared mentally incompetent by a judge in Missouri, placed under my guardianship for her own protection. The brands, regrettable, but necessary for identification purposes. She has a tendency to wander. Elias didn't even glance at the papers. Get off my land. The thick-set man, Elias mentally tagged him as Bull, shifted in his saddle, hand drifting toward his sidearm. The thin one, Snake, had already positioned himself with a clear line of sight to both the house and barn. Now, Crow said, still wearing that predator's smile. No need for unpleasantness. I'm willing to compensate you for your trouble. Shall we say $50 for feeding and sheltering her these past days? I said get off my land. 100 then. You're a businessman. Mr. Boone, surely we can come to an arrangement. The only arrangement is you leaving. Now. Crow's pale eyes hardened. You seem like an intelligent man. Fought in the war. I'm told, Union side, a hero, some might say. It would be a shame if certain documents came to light suggesting otherwise. Amazing what records can be found or created when one has the right connections. Threaten me all you want. The girl stays. She's not a girl. She's property. My property. And I've traveled a long way to reclaim what's mine. The mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something reptilian beneath. Do you have any idea how much time and money I've invested in her training, breaking her in properly? The brands alone cost... Elias moved so fast that Bull barely had time to clear leather. His fist connected with Crow's jaw, sending the man sprawling in the dust. Snake's gun appeared in his hand as if by magic, but Elias had already stepped back, hands raised but ready. That's twice this week I've had to dirty my knuckles on account of men who can't speak decent about a woman. Elias said calmly, I'm getting tired of it. Crow picked himself up slowly, dabbing at his split lip with a silk handkerchief. The civilized mask was gone now, replaced by naked fury. You have no idea what you've done, he said softly. No idea who I am, what I'm capable of. I own judges, sheriffs, whole towns. I could buy and sell this pitiful farm 10 times over. Then why don't you take your money and your threats and your hired guns and find some other corner of hell to rule over? This one's taken. She's mine! The words exploded from Crow like venom. I marked her, trained her. She exists because I allow it. The door to the house flew open. Clara stood there, rifle raised, her face pale but determined. I exist because I choose to, she said, her voice carrying across the yard. Because I survived everything you did to me. Every burn, every beating, every... She swallowed hard. I'm not yours. Jeb, I never was. I was just too broken to know it. Crow's face transformed at the sight of her. The rage melted into something worse, a possessive hunger that made Elias's skin crawl. There's my little bird, he crooned. Come now, Clara. This has gone on long enough. You know you can't survive out here. You need me, need what I provide. I need nothing from you but distance. Those brands say otherwise. They mark you as surely as... The rifle shot cracked across the yard, kicking up dust inches from Crow's boots. Clara worked the lever, chambering another round. The next one goes higher, she said flatly. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Crow laughed, a sound like breaking glass. You've taught her to bite. Boone, how amusing. But a dog that bites its master gets put down. He mounted his horse with deliberate slowness, This isn't over. Not by half. I'll be back, with the sheriff. With papers you can't ignore. With enough men to burn this place to ash if necessary. And when I'm done, she'll beg to come back to me. You both will." "Looking forward to it," Elias said. The three men wheeled their horses, but Crow paused at the edge of the yard. "Ask her about Baltimore." He called back. "Ask her what she did to the last man who tried to help her. See if your noble intentions survive that tale." Then they were gone, dust devils spinning in their wake. Clara lowered the rifle with shaking hands. Elias crossed to her, gently took the weapon. "You did good," he said. She laughed bitterly. "Did I? He'll be back, with more men, just like he said. And he's right, he does own judges. Has connections everywhere. There's nowhere far enough to run." "We're not running." "Then we're dying. Those are the only choices with Jeb Crow." She wrapped her arms around herself. "You should have let him take me. It would have been cleaner." "Never!" The word came out fierce. "I don't care how many judges he owns or men he brings. You're not going back to that." "What about Baltimore?" The question was barely a whisper. Elias met her eyes steadily. "I don't care about Baltimore. Whatever happened there, whatever he thinks will turn me against you, it doesn't matter. You're here now. That's all that counts." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You don't understand. In Baltimore, there was a reverend, a good man, like you. He tried to help me escape. Jeb found out. He made me watch while they—" She couldn't finish. "That's on Crow, not you. But it'll happen again. To you, because of me. And I can't watch another good man die for my sake." Elias took her shoulders gently. "Listen to me. I've seen war. I've seen what men do to each other in the name of causes both righteous and wrong. I came home and built this life, this quiet place, thinking I was done with fighting. But some fights find you whether you want them or not. And this one, protecting you from him, this is a fight worth having. Even if you lose?" "Especially then. A man's got to be able to look at himself in the mirror. I couldn't do that if I let him take you." She searched his face, looking for doubt, for regret, for any sign that Crow's threats had taken root. Finding none, she finally nodded. "He'll come at night next time," she said. "That's his way, in the darkness. When fear is strongest, we should prepare." "Then we'll be ready." He looked out at the horizon where the dust had settled. "Let him come with his papers and his men. This is my land, and you're under my protection. That means something out here, no matter what he thinks." But they both knew Crow would be back. Men like him didn't accept defiance. They crushed it, made examples of those who dared say no. The brands on Clara's back were proof enough of that. As they walked back to the house, Elias noticed Clara no longer hunched her shoulders or kept her eyes downcast. Fear still lived in her, might always live there. But something else had kindled too. Defiance, hope. It would have to be enough. The days that followed Crow's visit took on a strange rhythm. Ordinary tasks performed under the shadow of approaching storm. Clara threw herself into farm work with desperate energy, as if proving her usefulness might somehow justify the danger she'd brought to Elias's door. In the pre-dawn darkness, she was already up, stoking the stove and mixing biscuit dough. When Elias emerged from the barn where he still insisted on sleeping, breakfast waited, coffee black as midnight, eggs from the hens she'd taken to calling by name, bacon fried crisp. "You don't have to do all this," he said one morning, watching her darn a hole in one of his work shirts with tiny, precise stitches. "Idle hands," she murmured, not looking up. "Besides, it's been a long time since I've had work that was my own choosing. Let me have this." So he did. He watched her find her place in the daily rhythm of the farm, feeding chickens, gathering eggs, mending what was torn, cooking meals that grew more elaborate as she regained confidence in her skills. The haunted look in her eyes faded by degrees, replaced by something that might have been contentment, if not for the way she still startled at unexpected sounds. Still checked the horizon for dust clouds. It was the third evening after Crow's visit when she surprised him. He'd been oiling harness leather in the barn when her voice drifted through the doorway, singing, just humming at first, then words, soft and sweet. In the sweet by and by, we shall meet on that beautiful shore. He stood frozen, afraid to move lest he break the spell. It had been 5 years since a woman's voice had sung in this place. Martha used to sing while she worked, filling the air with hymns and folk songs. Hearing Clara now was like spring water in the desert. The singing stopped abruptly. She appeared in the doorway, cheeks flushed. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you could hear—" "Don't apologize, it was beautiful." He cleared his throat. "You have a lovely voice." "Mama, the woman who ran the orphanage, she taught us hymns, said it would make us more adoptable." A bitter smile touched her lips. "Didn't work out that way for me. Their loss." She studied him for a moment, then came into the barn, settling on a hay bale near where he worked. "Can I ask you something?" He nodded, hands still busy with the leather. "Your wife, Martha, how did she die?" "Consumption. Took her slow, over months. Nothing the doctor could do but make her comfortable at the end." "You loved her very much." "I did, still do, I suppose. Love doesn't stop just because someone's gone." Clara pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them. "I wouldn't know. Never had anyone to love. Not really. There were girls at the orphanage I was fond of, but they always left, got adopted or ran off or—" She shrugged. "Then the factory. Then Jeb bought my contract, and after that—" "You don't have to tell me." "Maybe I need to. Maybe if you know the worst of it, you'll understand why I can't stay, why I have to leave before—" "You're not leaving." She continued as if he hadn't spoken. "He bought me when I was 15, said I showed promise, took me to his estate in Missouri, had tutors teach me to speak proper, to read and write better, to play piano. I thought I was so stupid. I thought he was going to make me into a lady, maybe even marry me." Her laugh was sharp as winter wind. "Then I turned 16, and I learned what he really wanted, what I was being trained for. When I tried to run the first time, that's when he branded me, said if I was going to act like livestock, he'd mark me as such." Elias's hands had stilled on the leather. Rage built in his chest, hot and familiar. He'd felt it during the war when they'd found what Confederate raiders had done to Union sympathizers' families, the desire to destroy those who preyed on the innocent. "The second time I ran, he caught me in Baltimore. That reverend I mentioned, Reverend Mills, he'd hidden me in his church. When Jeb found out—" She pressed her face against her knees. "They made me watch, made me choose which fingers they'd break first. Said it was my fault for involving a good man in my wickedness. Clara." "The third time, I made it as far as Kansas before they caught up. That's when he did the other brands. Said he'd mark every inch of me if that's what it took. Said I'd never be anything but his property, that no decent person would look at me without seeing what I was." She raised her head, eyes bright with unshed tears. "He was right about that part. You saw how the townspeople looked at me, like I was diseased, ruined. They're fools." "Are they? I am ruined." He made sure of that. Everything he did, every mark he put on me, it was all to make sure I could never be anything else, never be free, even if I got away. Elias set aside the harness and moved to sit beside her on the hay bale. "Not touching, just near. You're free now." "Am I? He's out there, planning. And when he comes back, we'll be ready." "You can't fight the whole world, Elias, and that's what he'll bring. The law, hired guns, maybe even the cavalry if he can manage it. He has friends in high places. So did the Confederacy. They still lost." That startled a genuine laugh from her. "You're impossible. Stubborn, Martha used to say, set in my ways like a mule in mud." They sat in comfortable silence as twilight deepened outside. The barn cats emerged from their hiding places, prowling for mice. One, a tabby Clara had named Duchess, wound around her ankles, purring. "I've been happy here," Clara said suddenly. "These past days. It feels wrong to be happy when I know what's coming, but I can't help it. Working with my hands, cooking meals someone actually appreciates, sitting by the fire in the evening while you read from that book of poetry. You could have that always. Here." She turned to look at him fully. "Could I? Even after Jeb comes? Even if the whole town turns against you? Even if—" "Yes." The word was firm as bedrock. "Whatever comes, yes." "Why?" The question came out broken. "Why would you risk everything for someone like me?" He thought for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "During the war, I saw plenty of men who thought they had the right to own others, to break them down, use them up, throw them away. I fought against that then. Can't see my way to stopping now just because the war's officially over." "That's not really an answer." "No." He met her eyes. "Then how about this? You deserve a chance at a real life. Everyone does. And if I can give you that chance by standing between you and him, then that's what I'll do. It's that simple." "Nothing's that simple. Best things usually are. Complicated is what people like Crow make things, with their papers and laws and brands. Simple is just, you're a human being who deserves to be free. I have the means to help, so I will." Clara was quiet for a long time. Then, so softly he almost missed it. "I'm not used to simple. Takes some adjusting to, but you're doing fine." She smiled, a real smile that transformed her face, made her look young as she actually was. Martha was a lucky woman. I was the lucky one. Still am, in a way. Lucky to have this place, this life. Lucky you turned up in my barn when you needed help. Most wouldn't call that lucky. Most folks don't know what they're talking about. The barn had grown dark around them. Elias stood, offered her his hand. "Come on, supper won't cook itself." She took his hand, let him pull her to her feet, but instead of letting go, she held on for a moment, studying his calloused palm. "Hands that work," she murmured. "Hands that build instead of tear down. I'd forgotten such things existed." Then she released him and headed for the house, humming again, a different hymn this time, something about storms and shelter. Elias followed, carrying the weight of her story, the knowledge of what had been done to her. Jeb Crow would come back. That was certain as sunrise. He'd bring violence and lies and all the force money could buy. But watching Clara move through his kitchen, lighting lamps against the darkness, stirring something that smelled of home, Elias knew he'd made the right choice. Some things were worth fighting for, worth dying for. If it came to that, a young woman's chance at freedom, at a life without fear, yes, that was worth whatever storm was brewing on the horizon. He checked the loads in his rifle before hanging it back above the door, then settled into his chair by the fire. Clara brought him coffee, black as he liked it, and took up her own seat with a mending basket. Just another evening on a Nebraska farm, peaceful, ordinary. The calm before the storm. But for now, for this moment, it was enough. Clara was humming again, needle flashing in the lamplight, and the coffee was hot, and the fire was warm, and tomorrow's troubles could wait until tomorrow. For now, this was enough. The morning arrived with unnatural stillness, the kind that made horses nervous and set dogs to whining. Clara felt it first, a prickle along her spine as she scattered feed for the chickens. The birds pecked half-heartedly, heads lifting between grains to scan the sky. Then she saw them, 5 riders cresting the hill, moving with deliberate slowness. Jeb Crow rode in the center, his black duster unmistakable even at a distance. Flanking him were his 2 men from before, plus 2 others. But what made Clara's blood run cold was the 6th rider, slightly apart from the others. Sheriff Clayton, his badge catching the morning sun like an accusation. "Elias!" Her voice carried sharp across the yard. He emerged from the barn, took in the scene with one sweep of his eyes. His face hardened but showed no surprise. They'd both known this moment would come. "Get inside," he said quietly. "No." The word came out firm as iron. "Not this time. I won't hide while you face them alone." He looked at her, really looked, and saw something that made him nod slowly. "All right, but stay behind me." The riders entered the yard in formation, spreading out in a half-circle that cut off any escape route. But it wasn't just them. Following on foot came others, townspeople. Thomas McKenna with his still bruised face, the Hutchinsons from the general store, Reverend Caldwell in his severe black coat, and at least a dozen others. They hung back at the property's edge, but their presence was clear, witnesses to whatever was about to unfold. Sheriff Clayton dismounted first, a tall man with graying whiskers and the tired eyes of someone who'd compromised too many times. He'd been a good lawman once, before Crow's money found its way into his pockets. "Elias," he said, touching his hat brim. "Miss, I'm here on official business." What business would that be? Jim? Elias kept his voice easy, conversational. The sheriff pulled out a folded document. "Got a writ here, legal and proper. Says the young woman is a ward of Mr. Crow, escaped from lawful custody. I'm obligated to return her." "You're obligated to uphold justice. This isn't it." Clayton's face tightened. "Now, I've known you a long time. Elias, don't make this harder than it needs to be. The law is the law." "Whose law?" Clara stepped forward, surprising everyone. Her voice carried clear across the yard, reaching the gathered townspeople. "The law that lets a man brand a woman like cattle. The law that calls me property instead of a person." Jeb Crow dismounted with his usual grace, smiling that cold smile. "Such spirit. I've missed that about you, Clara, though I thought we'd trained it out of you properly." "You trained me to survive," Clara said. "That's all, and I survived you." The crowd stirred, whispers rippling through them. Some of the women leaned forward, seeing Clara differently now, not as the mysterious fallen woman, but as someone who'd endured and escaped. "Sheriff," Crow said, impatience creeping into his cultured voice. "Do your duty." But Clara wasn't finished. She walked forward, past Elias despite his attempt to stop her, until she stood in the center of the yard where everyone could see her clearly. "You want to know what these brands mean?" She raised her voice, addressing the crowd as much as Crow. "They mean I wouldn't break. Every time he burned me, I held on to who I was. Every mark he made, I turned into a reminder that I was still human, still fighting." "Enough of this nonsense." Crow snapped. He gestured to his men. "Take her." But as Bull and Snake moved forward, Elias's rifle appeared in his hands, not pointed at anyone, just held ready. "First man who touches her gets ventilated," he said calmly. "You'd threaten duly appointed deputies?" Sheriff Clayton's hand moved to his own weapon. "I see hired thugs, not deputies, and a sheriff who's forgotten what his job really is." "This is ridiculous," Crow said. "She's my legal property. I have papers." Papers lie." A voice called from the crowd. Everyone turned to see who'd spoken. It was Mrs. Peterson, the minister's wife, a woman who'd never said a controversial word in her life. She stepped forward, chin raised. "Papers can say anything if you pay the right people, but that girl's no more property than I am." "Thank you for your opinion," Crow said coldly. "But the law once said my grandfather could own human beings." Samuel Washington spoke up. He was the town's blacksmith, a free black man who'd come west after the war. "That didn't make it right. Some laws need breaking." The crowd was shifting now, murmuring. Not all of them. McKenna and others like him stood firm in their judgment. But enough to matter. Clara seized the moment. "He killed Reverend Mills in Baltimore, a good man who tried to help me, made me watch while his men beat him to death. Is that the law you're here to enforce, Sheriff Clayton?" The sheriff's face had gone pale. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth," Just like the truth about Judge Harwick in Missouri, who signed those guardianship papers. How much did you pay him? Jeb, how many other girls has he signed over to men like you? Shut your mouth, Crow snarled, his civilized mask finally slipping completely. No, I'm done being silent, done being ashamed. She turned in a slow circle, meeting the eyes of the watching townspeople. You've all been wondering what kind of woman I am, what I did to deserve these marks. I'll tell you, I said no. That's my crime. I said no to being owned, to being used, to being less than human. And I'll keep saying it until I draw my last breath. Brave words, Crow said, but words won't change what you are, what I made you. You're right, Clara said. You made me. You made me strong enough to survive you. You made me brave enough to stand here now and face you. You made me certain that no matter what happens today, I'll never go back to being your victim. The silence that followed was profound. Even the wind had stilled, as if the prairie itself held its breath. Then Elias spoke, his voice carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Jim, you've got a choice to make. You can try to take her, and I'll drop you where you stand. Then your deputized thugs will kill me, and likely her too. Is that the kind of law you want to enforce? The kind written in blood? Sheriff Clayton looked around, at the crowd, at Clara standing defiant in the morning sun, at Elias ready to die for a principle. Something shifted in his weathered face. Or, Elias continued, you can remember who you used to be, the man who wore that badge with honor, the man Martha used to speak well of. You can decide that some money isn't worth your soul. Don't be a fool, Clayton, Crow hissed. You know what I can do to you, to this whole town. Maybe, the sheriff said slowly. But I'm tired of knowing that. Tired of being owned just as sure as you think you own her. He turned to face Crow fully. Mr. Crow, I find your documentation suspect and your character wanting. You're no longer welcome in my jurisdiction. The crowd gasped. McKenna started forward. Now see here, Sheriff. Shut up, Thomas, Clayton said wearily. I've listened to you and men like you for too long. Look the other way while you made this town smaller and meaner with your judgment. He unpinned his badge, looked at it for a long moment, then pinned it back on. Time I started earning this again. Crow's face had gone white with rage. You'll regret this, all of you. I'll bring an army if I have to. I'll burn this worthless town to ash. Try it, Samuel Washington said, stepping forward. Others joined him, not all, but enough. A wall of citizens between Clara and the men who would take her. This isn't over, Crow said, mounting his horse with sharp, angry movements. You hear me, girl? This will never be over. You're marked. You'll always be marked. No matter where you run, everyone will know what you are. Clara walked through the crowd until she stood directly in front of his horse. She looked up at him. This man who'd terrorized her for years, who'd tried to break her down to nothing. You're wrong, she said simply. They'll know what I survived. They'll know I was stronger than you, and that's all that matters. For just a moment, she saw something flicker in Crow's eyes, not fear exactly, but the recognition that his power had limits, that all his money and connections couldn't buy him everything. Then the moment passed. He wheeled his horse around. Move out, he barked to his men. They followed, but not without backward glances, hands near their weapons. As they reached the edge of the property, Crow turned back one last time. This isn't over. Boone, you've made an enemy today you can't afford. I made that enemy the moment I decided she was human, and you were wrong. Elias replied. I can live with that. The riders disappeared over the hill, dust settling in their wake. The crowd began to disperse, but not quickly. Several women approached Clara, tentatively, like she might spook. We should have spoken up sooner, Mrs. Peterson said quietly. I'm ashamed we didn't. Clara's eyes filled with tears, the first she'd allowed herself in front of others. "You spoke up when it mattered. That's enough." Sheriff Clayton approached Elias. "He'll be back, with more men. Like he said, I can't stop him if he brings a federal marshal or—" "We'll deal with that when it comes." Elias said, "You did the right thing today. Jim, that's all any of us can do, the right thing. One day at a time." The sheriff nodded, touched his hat to Clara, and walked away. The yard slowly emptied until only Clara and Elias remained. "You were magnificent," he said softly. She laughed, shaky with released tension. "I was terrified." Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about speaking your truth despite the fear. They stood there in the morning sun, surrounded by scratching chickens and the normal sounds of farm life returning. The storm had come and passed, leaving them standing, but they both knew it would return. "He won't give up," Clara said. "Neither will we." She looked at him, this quiet man who'd risked everything for her freedom. "Thank you for believing I was worth defending." "You defended yourself today. I just stood back up." Clara smiled, real and warm. "Then thank you for that, for standing back up, for giving me a place to find my voice again." They walked back to the house together, side by side, behind them, in the dust of the yard. The marks of Crow's horses were already fading, but what had happened there? A woman claiming her humanity. A town beginning to remember its conscience. That would last. The brands on Clara's back would never fade, but now she knew they weren't the end of her story. They were just the beginning. The aftermath of the confrontation rippled through Cedar Falls like waves from a dropped stone. In the general store, conversations halted when Clara entered. But now, instead of hostile whispers, there were nods of acknowledgement, even a few tentative smiles. Mrs. Hutchinson, who had been so cold before, wordlessly added an extra apple to Clara's basket and refused payment. "Changes are coming hard and fast," Sheriff Clayton said one evening, stopping by the farm. He'd taken to checking in regularly, his renewed sense of purpose evident in his straightened shoulders and clear eyes. "Had 3 men asking about hiring guns in the saloon yesterday. Sent them on their way, but word is Crow's put out a bounty." "How much am I worth?" Clara asked with dark humor. $500 for your return. $1,000 if Elias here has an accident along the way." Elias set down his coffee cup carefully. "That's a lot of money." "Enough to tempt desperate men." Clayton agreed. "I've wired the federal marshal in Omaha. Told him what's really going on, but Crow's got influence there too." "Then we prepare for the worst," Elias said simply. But it wasn't hired guns who came first. 3 days after Clayton's warning, a buggy rolled up to the farm carrying an unexpected visitor, Judge Theodore Hampton from the county seat, a man known for his fairness and his refusal to be bought. "Miss Wilson," he said, tipping his hat. "Mr. Boone, I've heard some disturbing tales about fraudulent guardianship papers and illegal bondage. Thought I'd better investigate personally." Clara's hands trembled as she served tea in the parlor. Here was the law again. But which version? The corrupted one that had failed her before? Or something better? "Tell me your story," Judge Hampton said gently. "All of it. Take your time." So she did. For 2 hours. She spoke about the orphanage, the factory, Jeb Crow's purchase of her labor contract, the escalating abuse, the brands. The judge's face grew stonier with each detail, his notes filling page after page. "These brands," he said finally. "Would you be willing to show them to a court? I know it's asking a great deal. If it would help stop him from doing this to others." "Yes." Clara's voice was steady despite her pallor. "It would. What he's done, what men like him have been doing, using legal technicalities to create slavery by another name. It needs to be exposed." He closed his notebook. "I'll need you to testify in court. It won't be easy. He'll have lawyers, witnesses who'll lie for pay. They'll try to tear down your character." "They can try," Clara said. But I've already been torn down to nothing and built myself back up. Words can't hurt worse than whips and brands. Judge Hampton stood. I'll file papers immediately. A restraining order to start. Then criminal charges. Kidnapping, assault, false imprisonment. The list is long. He'll fight, Elias warned. Let him. I've been waiting for a case like this. One clear enough to set precedent. To show that the law won't tolerate slavery under any guise. The judge paused at the door. You're brave, Miss Wilson. What you did in that yard, standing up to him publicly, that started something. Women all over the county are talking about it. About you. After he left, Clara sank into a chair. A trial, standing up in court, letting strangers stare at my brands, hear about my shame. Your survival, Elias corrected. That's what they'll hear about, your strength. She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. What if it's not enough? What if he wins anyway? Then we'll face that together too. The word together hung in the air between them, weighted with promise. That evening, as Clara prepared supper, she found herself humming again. Not hymns this time, but an old folk song about freedom. Elias sat at the table, ostensibly reading, but really watching her move about the kitchen with growing ease, like she belonged there. I've been thinking, she said suddenly, not turning from the stove, about if we win the trial. If Crow goes to prison, or at least leaves me alone, what then? What do you want to happen then? She did turn then, spoon still in hand. I don't know. I've never had the luxury of planning a future before. It was always just survive today, then survive tomorrow. Well, Elias said carefully, the farm can always use an extra pair of hands. The house has been too quiet since Martha passed, and the chickens seem to lay better since you've been tending them. A smile tugged at her lips. Is that so? Gospel truth, and your biscuits are better than mine ever were. Such flattery. But she was really smiling now. You'd want me to stay? Even after all this trouble I've brought? Trouble? He shook his head. You've brought life back to this place. Made me remember what it's like to have something worth protecting besides crops and cattle. She turned back to the stove, but he could see the flush on her cheeks. Elias Boone, are you courting me? Maybe I am. Man's allowed to court a brave woman who makes fine biscuits and sings while she works. I'm damaged goods. The whole town knows it. He stood, crossed to her, gently turned her to face him. You're not goods at all. You're a person, a remarkable one. And if I'm lucky enough that you'd consider staying, consider building something here with me, well, that would make me the richest man in Nebraska. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I don't know how to be courted. How to be normal. I only know how to run and hide and survive. Then we'll learn together. No rushing, no expectations. Just two people figuring out how to build a life worth living. She studied his weathered face. This man who'd stood between her and harm without hesitation. Who saw her not as damaged goods, but as someone worth defending. Worth courting. Worth keeping. I'd like that, she whispered. Learning together? A sound from outside broke the moment. Horses, moving fast. They both tensed, but it was only Samuel Washington and several other men from town. Evening, Elias, Miss Clara. Samuel called. Thought you should know. Strangers in town asking questions. 4 of them. Rough-looking sorts. Sheriff's got his eye on them. But we figured you'd want warning. Appreciated. Elias said. You men didn't have to ride out here? Yes, we did, Samuel said firmly. What Miss Clara said the other day, about saying no to being owned, that resonated with some of us more than others. We've decided if trouble comes, it won't find you standing alone. Clara appeared in the doorway. Mr. Washington, I don't know what to say. Don't say nothing, just keep being brave. You've lit a fire in this town. Miss Clara reminded us that standing up for what's right is worth the risk. He touched his hat. We'll be heading back, but know you've got friends now, real ones. After they left, Clara stood in the yard, looking up at the stars beginning to appear. A week ago, this whole town saw me as something shameful. Now they're riding out here to warn us, offering to stand with us. You changed their minds, showed them who you really are. Or maybe, she said softly, you showed them it was okay to see me differently. You stood up first, Elias. That mattered. He moved to stand beside her, careful not to touch, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. We stood up together. That's what mattered. Together, she repeated, testing the word. I like the sound of that. In town, Sheriff Clayton made his rounds, noting the strangers' positions, the horses they'd ridden, the guns they carried. He'd sent word to Judge Hampton about the trial date, 2 weeks hence, 2 weeks for Crow to make his move, to try one last time to reclaim what he saw as his property. But Jim Clayton had worn a badge for 20 years, had forgotten for a while what it meant but remembered now. And he'd be damned if he'd let harm come to that brave girl or the man protecting her. Not on his watch, not in his town. The stars came out fully, scattered across the Nebraska sky like promises of better tomorrows. On the Boone farm, 2 people stood watching them, planning a future neither had dared imagine before. In town, good people prepared to stand against evil, even if it cost them. And somewhere in the darkness, Jeb Crow's hired men made their plans, never knowing they were already outnumbered by something more powerful than guns or money. A community that had remembered its conscience, sparked by one woman's courage to say no, to say never again, to say, I am not property, I am not branded livestock, I am human. The trial would come. The danger was real. But for tonight, Clara May Wilson stood free under the stars, her hand finally, tentatively, slipping into Elias Boone's calloused one. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. Thank you, he replied, for reminding me that some fights are worth having. Together they walked back to the house, to warmth and light, and the promise of tomorrow. Whatever came next, they would face it standing up, speaking truth, refusing to bow to those who would make people property. The brands on Clara's back would always be there, but they no longer defined her story. She did, and she was just getting started. The evening sun painted the Nebraska sky in shades of gold and crimson, casting long shadows across the porch where Clara and Elias sat in companionable silence. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Crow. The trial had concluded 3 days ago. Crow found guilty on all charges, sentenced to 10 years hard labor, his property seized, his other victims found and freed. Justice, imperfect but real, had finally been served. I never thought I'd see him in shackles, Clara said softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Even when Judge Hampton read the verdict, part of me expected Crow to laugh, to produce some paper that made it all go away. But he didn't. Elias's voice was gentle. He's gone, Clara. Can't hurt you or anyone else anymore. She nodded, but her eyes remained distant. The marks are still there, though they always will be. Yes, Elias agreed simply. They will. She looked at him, surprised by his blunt honesty when others might have offered platitudes. But you know what else will always be there? He continued. Your courage, your survival, the way you stood up in that courtroom and told your truth even when your voice shook, the way you looked him in the eye when they led him away. I had to, for the other girls he hurt, for the ones he might have hurt if we hadn't stopped him. She set down her cup, pulled her shawl tighter despite the warm evening. Do you know what he said to me, right before they took him? He leaned close and whispered, You'll always be marked as mine. Elias's jaw tightened. He's wrong. Is he? Clara stood abruptly, pacing to the porch rail. Every time someone sees the scars, they'll think of him, of what he did. I'll carry his cruelty on my skin forever. Elias rose, joined her at the rail, but didn't touch her. Can I tell you something about the war? She nodded. Got this scar here. He indicated his left forearm. from a Confederate bayonet at Shiloh. For years, every time I saw it, I was back in that muddy field, watching boys die for causes they barely understood. The scar was just pain, memory of the worst humanity had to offer. What changed? Martha. His smile was soft with memory. She'd trace that scar sometimes, gentle-like. Said it wasn't just a mark of violence, it was proof I'd survived. Come home, built something good despite the horror. She helped me see it different, not as something that defined me, but as part of a larger story. Clara turned to face him fully. And what's my larger story? That's for you to write, but from where I stand, I see a woman who refused to be broken, who found strength in the darkest places, who lit a fire in this whole town just by speaking her truth. He paused. Who makes the best biscuits in 3 counties and has the chickens laying double what they used to? Despite everything, she laughed. You and those biscuits. Man knows what's important. His expression grew serious again. Clara, those marks, they're not who you are. They're just something that happened to you. Like my war scars. Like Martha's grave out back. Parts of our stories. But not the whole tale. She was quiet for a long moment, then reached into her pocket and drew out something small, a dried wildflower, carefully preserved. Remember this? She asked. You left it by the kitchen window that 3rd morning I was here. Never said anything, just left it there for me to find. First gift anyone ever gave me without wanting something back. Figured you might like something pretty, something chosen, not forced. I pressed it in Martha's Bible. Hope that's okay. She would have liked that. Would have liked you. Clara tucked the flower away carefully. I've been thinking about what you said. About staying. About courting. Elias waited, patient as always. I don't know how to be a wife. Don't know how to be normal. I can cook and clean and tend chickens, but... She struggled for words. What if I wake up screaming from nightmares? What if I flinch when you move too fast? What if... Then we'll face it, he interrupted gently. Just like we've faced everything else. Together. You make it sound simple. Best things usually are. I care for you. Clara May Wilson. Not despite what you've been through, but because of who you are. All of it, scars and strengths alike. If you'll have me, I'd like to court you proper. Take you to church socials, Sunday picnics. Show this whole town that Elias Boone is stepping out with the bravest woman in Nebraska. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I'm not brave. I'm just what? Just trying to learn how to be free. Seems brave enough to me. He pulled out his handkerchief, offered it to her. So, what do you say? Will you let me court you? She wiped her eyes, then surprised them both by laughing. Elias Boone, you've been courting me since the day you gave me that coat in the barn. Fed me, sheltered me, stood between me and harm, made me feel human again. If that's not courting, I don't know what is. That was just being decent. No. Her voice was firm. That was being extraordinary. And yes, I'll let you court me official-like, though folks might talk. Walking out with a marked woman. Let them. They'll be too jealous to say much anyway. The sun had nearly set now, painting everything in soft twilight. From somewhere in the growing darkness came the sound of a nightingale. It sung pure and sweet. I used to think the Brands meant I belonged to him. Clara said quietly, that I was less than human, just property he'd marked. But standing in that courtroom, telling my story, watching him get led away, I realized something. What's that? The Brands don't say I belong to him. They say I survived him. Every mark is proof that I endured something meant to destroy me and came out the other side. She took a deep breath. I'm not his, never was. Really, even when he thought he owned me. The part that mattered. My spirit, my choice, my ability to say no, that was always mine. Elias held out his hand, palm up, offering but not demanding. And now, she looked at his hand, scarred from work and war, gentle despite its strength. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Now I'm my own, free to choose my own path, free to accept gifts of wildflowers, free to be courted by a good man who sees me true. She squeezed his fingers. Free to maybe, someday, choose to belong with someone instead of to them. There's a difference. All the difference in the world. They stood there as full dark settled over the prairie, hands linked, watching the stars emerge one by one. The nightingale continued its song, joined by crickets and the distant lowing of cattle, normal sounds of a Nebraska evening, made precious by peace, by possibility, by the promise of tomorrows not shadowed by fear. I should start supper, Clara said eventually, though she made no move to go. In a minute, Elias was looking at her in the starlight, memorizing this moment. Just let me look at you, free and choosing and here. She smiled, shy but genuine. I'm not going anywhere. Elias Boone, you've got time to look. All the time in the world, he agreed, when they finally went inside. Clara humming that folk song about freedom. Elias carrying the coffee cups. Everything looked the same as it had that first night, the kitchen, the stove, the table where she'd eaten with desperate hunger. But everything was different too. This was home now, chosen rather than desperate refuge. The woman moving confidently around the kitchen was marked, yes, but not broken, scarred but not defined by those scars. As Clara reached for the flour to start biscuits, because some things had become tradition already, she paused by the window. There on the sill sat a new wildflower, fresh picked, its petals still holding the day's warmth. You're going to spoil me with all these flowers, she said without turning. That's the plan, Elias replied. Gotta give you new things to press in that Bible. Happy things, chosen things. She picked up the flower, inhaled its sweet scent. I'm starting to believe in happy endings again. Is that foolish? Not foolish at all, though I'd call this more of a beginning than an ending. Clara turned to him, flower still in her hand, eyes bright with tears and hope in equal measure. A beginning. I like that better. Outside, the nightingale sang on, its melody carrying across the darkened prairie. Inside, two people prepared a simple meal, their movements easy with growing familiarity, their silence comfortable with understanding. The brands on Clara's back would always be there. Yes, but they were just scars now, not chains. Part of her story, but not its conclusion. She was free. She was choosing to stay. She was learning, day by day, that survival could transform into something richer, deeper, sweeter than mere endurance. And if sometimes she still woke in the night, trembling from dreams of hot iron and cruel laughter, there was someone there to hold her, to remind her where she was, who she was. Not property, not branded goods, but Clara May Wilson, survivor and thriver, maker of excellent biscuits and tender of chickens. Woman loved and loving in return. The scars would always tell one truth, but the life she was building told a greater one, that no mark, no matter how deep, could touch the essential self that had always been free, just waiting for the chance to spread its wings. In the small kitchen of a Nebraska farmhouse, two people shared a meal and planned a future. Outside, the vast prairie stretched endlessly under stars that had witnessed all of human cruelty and human kindness alike, and would witness more of both tomorrow. But tonight, in this moment, kindness won, love won, freedom won. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.